Where's Dr. Al?
Would somebody like to read the English text of Exodus 3? Just to start off? You would like to?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got it memorized.
Can you say it loud enough for people to hear?
I'll try.
He's got a good voice.
Exodus 3.
Exodus in Hebrew is the word Shavuot, which is actually the word for names. Shem is name, and then you've got Yod Mem, so if it was Shemim, that's how you spell the word heavens, Shemayim. That would be the masculine suffix.
Going back down or back
Shemot is the feminine suffix. And just for the record, I'm not that literate in Hebrew, nor am I grammatically educated to tell you the exact difference of why should names be Shemot and heavens be Shemayim or Shemim. But like in Spanish, where casa ends with an A, it makes it a feminine suffix. Well, what about the house is feminine? Or why should, I believe the word caso is the word thing, which would, I think in Spanish, which is the masculine O ending. So just because it's what they call a feminine or masculine suffix doesn't necessarily mean it has anything to do with male or female. It's just tenses of the way the language is structured. So you have these suffix endings in Hebrew, whether it's a Yod Mem or a Vav Tav. Literally, it's just a masculine and feminine plural suffix. That's my understanding. There probably is other aspects to the language which I'm unaware of. But just to say, the word Shemot has to do with names, and the reason why Exodus is called names in Hebrew, if you look at Exodus chapter 1, if I can find the page here, the first sentence says, "And these are the names of the children of Israel who were coming to Egypt with Jacob, each man and his household came." So because the first verse says these are the names, then the word names is Shemot, and so the book is called Shemot. But in English, the concept of the book is, oh, this is all about the Exodus. Genesis ends with the story of Joseph about to died at 110 years. That's the last verse of Genesis. So it's the end of the era of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 sons of Jacob. And so Exodus starts with now a whole nother phase. Moses hadn't been born yet at the beginning of Exodus, so it starts with, okay, here's a whole nother era of something happening. So Shemot, names, you could say really has nothing to do with the story. The story is the story of the Exodus. However, in the study of the Hebrew language, is what I would call the Paleo-Hebrew, is that every letter means something, every word means something, and there's a way to read into the text deeper than the surface level narrative. Has anybody not heard of the word Pardes? Do you know what Pardes means? You don't know what that means?
Paradise.
Okay, so in English we have the word paradise, and you could say that the consonantal fixtures are P, R, D, and S. In between are vowels. That's the structure of the English language. Well, coincidentally, you know, paradise, that's the wonderful place. Coincidentally, in Hebrew, if you write P, R, D, S, you have what's called the Pashat. Well, that's the surface narrative level of reading a text. And these are Hebrew words that happen to have the same consonants as paradise. Ramez which is reading into a text allegorically. And then you have drash, which is to search out and really get in there and make these connections. And then you have the sod, which is secrets. And as Brad Scott has said, it's family secrets. It's not just, some pirate buried a treasure, I wonder where he put it. But these are like, don't tell anybody. For example, I read in a book once that one of the basic rules of a village or some settlement out in the days before we had cities such as we know them now was the first thing you teach your children is don't tell any stranger where we get our water. Any stranger could be an enemy, and what they're going to do is poison the water system, or they'll capture it so now they will control us. Do not let anybody know where we get our resources. So the sod level of understanding the scripture is where we get our living water. And if somebody could figure out what makes them Jews so strong, well, it's not about the Jews, it's about Israel. It's kind of like with Samson. Delilah was used as a spy. Find out what makes this guy so strong. So when you see movies of Samson and they use a guy like Schwarzenegger or Hulk Hogan or some, The Rock or somebody who's this big tough guy, what makes him so strong? Well, look, he's got big muscles. I don't think Samson looked like a big tough guy. I think Samson probably looked like some kind of wimpy guy like me or something. And it's like, how can this guy pick up the gates of a city and carry him up to the top of the hill? Might have weighed 1,000 pounds. Where does he get his strength? That was the question. It's like this guy doesn't look fit to have the capability. There's no intrinsic capacity to do what he does. But then you read about the laws of the Torah, and Moshe said, if you regard these words, it will do something to you, the nation of Israel, the 12 confederated tribes, and all the world will look at you and go, wow, what makes this people so strong, so capable, so fit, so agile, mentally, physically, economically? What makes their land thrive? They keep the words of this Torah. It's the source of empowerment, of living water. And soon as our enemies figured that out, well, what did Delilah do to Samson? Cut his hair. Oh, the source of your... how many times he was duped? What, 3 times? What's the source? He told her, and she did it to reduce, to compromise, to take the very insight that he had given her in love and used it against him, to deny him. That's what our enemy does. Our enemy, throughout time, throughout whatever jurisdiction, whether it's the devil, whether it's those guys on the other side of the world or the other side of the property line, Yeshua said, your enemy, your adversary, we refer to him as the devil, but he goes about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Now that doesn't mean he's allowed to devour everybody, but he seeks whom he may. So I liken it to this. Yahweh said, here's a straight path, and we're coming from here, Aleph, and we're going to there, Tav, and there's this deep ravine, and so this path is a walkway, and he says, as long as you stay on this straight path walkway, you can't be messed with. But you've got this adversary. So here we have this beast with these horns and these big teeth. And if you get off this path, his job is to devour you. And he goes about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Now I'm using English words, but my point is that the same? Yahweh says you're on this straight path, in Hebrew, Yashar, Yod, Shin, Resh, That's the word straight. If I put L, that's how you spell Israel. If I turn this into English letters, that's a J, and this is an SH, and this is R, and that's where you get the word Jasher. So the book of Jasher is actually the book of Yashar, which is straight. Whether the book of Yashar is believable, that's another story. I'm just trying to give you an association. The word Derek, Dalet, Resh, Kaf, is path or way or mode or the manner, the way which you conduct yourself. It also means to bend a bow like you're fit to pull something back and launch it. Like, so if this is the arrow and you have this bow with a string and you're going to put the arrow in here and you're going to launch the arrow to that, it's the same, having to do with the same word. So the path we are to walk is the conduct. So you have an arrow and then you put these feathers on, which are called the fletchings. And the fletchings are to make sure that the arrow stays true, to hit the destination, the target. So Yahuwah, to get us walking or to continue on the straight path, he gave us the Torah. So the Torah, you could say, are the fletchings on this arrow, which if we do them, we will hit the target. But he has also imposed or put into the system this adversary whose job it is to seek whomever he may devour. And he is not this, you could say, this winged creature up here with the horns and the pitchfork that can stab you while you're walking on the path. I don't believe that that's a true picture. I believe the picture is, if you get off this path, you have made yourself vulnerable. Now, if you walk this path, there are certain afflictions which are allowed, challenges. And Hugo, how do you describe it the other day, that it's a privilege to have what happened to you as you walk this path?
Well, to be tried by Yahweh, it's an honor because he's looking at us and he wants to see what we're made of.
The word to be tried, tested, or even experimented on, interestingly enough, is Nun Samech.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about Nun Samech is that the Samech is a trellis, or like the structure of a tree, the vertical trunk and the branches, or like a mast of a ship, right, with the yard arms and all. And so as a little symbol of the Erectology thing, we have the Samech in the color purple and the Nun on top of it. And this letter Nun represents life. It's the living, jumping, active letter. And so you could say, well, this is, as my wife was studying this out, this is life and this is support. So this little symbol, when we have the letters staged around it, well, that's a symbol of the life support system. And it's a picture also of this serpentine-shaped letter Nun. It's not a snake, but it's a rather flame-like serpentine shape that Moshe put this serpent on a stick and lifted it up. It doesn't say it's a serpent. It's a serpentine shape, and I saw a picture of a guy, I think it was it Rush Howe? Anyway, he did a book called Epidemic, and on the surface, the cover of the book, there's an old illustration of Moses holding up this thing that would look like a cloth, like a towel. It was kind of red color, and it's like, wait a minute, I thought it was supposed to be a snake on a staff. It wasn't necessarily a snake, but it was a serpentine-like flame. So again, we hear certain words in English, we think Moses lifted up a serpent, a snake, but yet they were told don't make any images of any creatures. So would Moses have lifted up a snake? Well, the people looked at it and they were saved from the biting of the snakes. And it's like, so we get in our minds these stories which are a big mixture. The only way to settle the whole matter out is go back to the words that are written. So the word Nahash can mean snake, but it can also mean serpentine or enchantment or glittering, shiny copper. So what was it? Did he make an image of a snake carved out of metal and put it up on a stick and lift it up? Well, maybe, but maybe not. There was another way that to see what he did, which he could have obeyed the instructions, don't make an image of anything, and yet lifted it up. And so when people looked at that thing, which was not an image of, but it was a serpentine, coppery, shiny shape, and when they looked on that, they were saved from the bites of these snakes that were sent because they had sinned. And so Yeshua said, just like Moshe lifted up this shape, serpentine shape on a stick, well, that's a nun and a samech. Then even so will the Son of Man. Now he referred to himself continually as the Son of Man. Did he ever call himself the Son of God? People accused him of making himself equal or equal to the Son of God, but we'd have to look back in the scripture and say, did he ever claim to be this thing, Son of God? I know he claimed to be Son of Man. Not to belabor that, but I'm saying we got to be careful what we are claiming we believe in and what it means and how do we justify those beliefs, because we hear stuff and we assimilate beliefs that are not necessarily what it says, nor is it necessarily accurate by which we should base our doctrines. Certainly he claimed to be the Son of Man, but Ezekiel was called the Son of Man. Does that make him a criminal? If he claimed to be the Son of God, see, that's where the Pharisee says, now you're making yourself equal with God, now we got to kill you. Now we get to kill you. Whatever. My point is, you could be accused of something, doesn't mean you're guilty of something. So again, we have to be careful what we're reading and what's being translated. Just the other day, Hugo noticed something that the translation says, the word Jew, but in the Hebrew it says Ivri. Well, that's Hebrew. Well, the Jews are Hebrews, but the Hebrews are not all necessarily Jews. There's 12 tribes of Israel. And then there was, you might say, a 13th, because the tribe of Joseph was broken into two, Ephraim and Manasseh. So by those names, there's actually another, there's 14 different names. And then certain people can choose to be aligned with Israel, such as the concept that some people like to bash, which is the Ashkenazi, the Khazarian factor. And not to get into that, but I'm just mentioning it for the record, anybody's allowed to be Israel. And people that have been bashing those guys, saying, hey, they're of the sons of Japheth, not even the sons of Shem, sons of Noah, they're not even real Semites. It's like, no, wait a minute. The northern kingdom was taken into captivity to the northeast of Israel by Assyria. And when Assyria was taken over by Babylon, and then Babylon taken over by Media-Persia, and then Greece took over Media-Persia. But during that time, every time one empire lost and another one came over, a bunch of the slaves escaped. And where did they go? Right up into the area of the Caucasus Mountains, otherwise known as Khazaria, and then they migrated through Europe and into the Orient. And just because you could say, hey, those guys are not necessarily the sons of Shem, being the Sephardic Jewish lineage, they might be of the lineage of the lost 10 tribes. And they don't necessarily even know it. So what I'm saying is that you hear stories bashing these people and telling that story, and like, listen, as far as I know, anybody on the face of the earth, any human, is allowed to align with Israel. And Yahweh said there will be one Torah for the native born as well as for the proselyte. So it doesn't matter whether you can follow your blood lineage or not. You're allowed to come to be Israel if you are going to the straight path of righteousness where the power of Elohim is. The straight path of righteousness, if you conduct yourself accordingly, you're allowed to be Israel. Whether or not you can trace your DNA or your lineage, or whether you find your DNA and determine, hey, Alfonso, shalom, shalom, Shabbat shalom, we're just getting started here.
You need a hand there?
Yay! Yes?
We've got a moment. Would you write the Hebrew words for Hebrew letters for the Peshat, Ramez, Yod?
Peshat would be Pei, Shin, Tav, I believe, or that might even be a Tet. I'd have to look that up. Ramez would be Resh, Mem, Zion. I'd have to look these up, but this is just phonetic consonants. Drosh would be Dalet, Resh, Shin. And Sod would be Samik, Vav, Dalet. So my point about all this is that this word Nas is actually, if you ever heard of Yahweh Nissi, so that would be Nun Samik with the letter Yod, and the letter Yod means my, but that changes this, and they say that word means banner. And it's like, Yahweh Nissi means Yahweh my banner? And then there's that phrase, his banner over us is love. And it's like, well, what's that got to do with what Hugo was just describing, which means to be tested, tried, experimented upon? It's also where we get the word for assay, like you take ore that you've dug out of the ground, gold or something, you take it to the assayer's office to test it, to reduce down its elements and say, is this pure? It's also where we get the word essay, like you take an exam where it says, okay, tell me everything you know, and the teacher will then evaluate whether it's credible enough for you to pass the course. It's all the same word. So the notion that while we are on this path of the Yashar Derek, that he will Nun Samik us, we could say, well, this guy's not the devil, he's some sort of Nas figure whose job it is to jab us with that pitchfork, to provoke us, to test us, to assay, harass. It's like, gosh, it's a gauntlet of challenges. And Hugo is saying it's an honor to be challenged by Yahuwah. Well, gosh, give me a break. This is Shabbat. This is your break.
Right.
Starting tomorrow, we're back on the gauntlet of challenges. The gamut. The word gamut is the first Latin word, otherwise referred to as just ut, which was changed to do, as in do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but that's another part of the story which we'll get to. But the gamut, the ut that this course that we're on is to be provoked by certain agents, and if we bail out and fall off the Yashar Derek, he's designed another agent to consume us as a roaring lion. And it's like, hey, that's just the course in life. That's just the way it goes. And if we don't like it, you're free to invent a different scenario and believe that if you'd like. So, different religions across the face of the earth have taken that prerogative, and they've invented a whole host of other creatures. They call them gods, they call them titans, they call them principalities or powerful entities or space aliens or ascended masters or whatever they want to call them. Do they exist? Well, let's study that and find out. No! Yahweh says, have no other Elohim in my face. Well, the word in my face in Hebrew is written al panei. Bad construct there. Panei. This word ayin lamed, pei nun yod, panei, actually if you make it plural, panim is the word face. But it says al panei, and so the word pan is where we get the English word pan, P-A-N. So like if you have the Pan-American Games, it's like the Olympics of just all the Western Hemisphere. All the Americas get together and play. So pan is like a camera pan is where it just moves and gets the whole scene. It's where we get the word panorama, which is this overview of this expanse. So the word pan also means kind or sort or type or a category. So you could say the word for face, why is it to say a variety of options? He designed our faces to manifest a whole variety of options of emotions, of feelings. And if you study animation or acting, there's hundreds of facial expressions. And then certain people detectives learn how to read the slightest little nuance. And if you do film work, animation or something, you will incorporate into the face of your character the slightest little difference, because they know that the human brain is designed to read those patterns and interpret them as meaning something. And so as we get older, we learn how to do that reading. And if somebody is going to be a good actor, they'll learn how to grab that face and portray it, and you'll think, are they acting or is that real? Maybe you don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter, because it's all communication. So what I'm saying is, this is in the second commandment of the 10 Commandments, where Yahuwah says, do not allow there to be or cause there to be. So the phrase is, lo, that's the negative, lamed aleph, ye, yod, hey, yod, hey. Well, if it was yod, hey, vav, hey, that's his name, yod, hey, vav, hey. But this is yod, hey, yod, hey. So there's it was yod, hey, wa, or vav, hey, that's the name Yahuwah, which means he will cause it to exist. So this spelling, hey, yod, hey, or hey, vav, hey, or sometimes it's yod, hey, yod, yahi, it has to do with existence. So you could read this as the prefix, he will cause it to exist. That's a way to break down. Anything with, just so you know, any word you find with heys, yods, and vavs, sometimes alephs, it all has to do with simply the verb to exist, or to be, or to make happen. So, and it says, lo yi, lakha, lamed kaf,
To you.
do not put, he will, this could be read as the prefix, suffix, prefix, not suffix, he will cause to exist. Do not, he will cause to exist for yourself, lakah, to you, unto you, by your own hand. The kaf is the suffix for you, and lamed means unto, or sometimes by, or toward, or for. So if you look in the Psalm, sometimes it'll say, here's a song, lamed Dawid. Does that mean it's for David or by David? There's no way to know, because the same prefix letter lamed can mean both. Well, if you put a vowel pronunciation, that clears it up. But there was no vowel points in the ancient days, so how do you know whether it was by David or for David? So then you get Psalms 110, where it says, here's a psalm by David. And he said, the Lord said to my Lord. Well, that's what David said. But then another translation will say, no, David didn't say that. Sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. David wasn't writing it about the Messiah. One of David's friends wrote this concerning David. Well, now how do you know who to believe? Is that a psalm written by David or for David? For the record, there's absolutely no way to know. You get to choose which translator you want to believe. So you read the Jewish translation in the Tanakh, and it'll say it's written for David. You read the Christian translation in the KJV, and it says it's written by David. And that one translation of that letter lamed sets up an entire doctrinal difference. The meaning of one letter, which appropriately has both meanings. So here's my point. If we're trying to decide what do these words mean, either our translation is going to help us stay on this Yashar Derek, or it's going to throw us into the pit. If we believe the wrong thing and we're off the track and we didn't know it, this guy is still allowed to try to devour us by all rights, because he was commissioned and put there as the adversary by Yahweh. And that's why when you read the book of Job, here's this courtroom in heaven, or this scene. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. We're recording something, but you're welcome to...
Shall we pause a little bit?
Sure, we could pause.
Okay.